is now more common than ever because more and more people are getting smarter and smarter about what they eat. But once upon a time, it was like, oh my God, gluten-free. So are you really gluten intolerant, or does it just make you fart a lot? That was in the beginning. That was like, is this Crohn's disease? Is it Crohn's?
Yeah, that's one of the big ones. Yeah.
Is it Crohn's disease where you could actually have to go to the hospital if you eat a sandwich? Or is it, you're just going to fart a lot later and have a bellyache?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, like how far we've come and understanding what is actually going on in the body. And, all these. By the way, we're recording. Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone. You did it again.
I did it again.
Yeah. You like that?
I do. Welcome to episode number 2 of Raising the Bar. And a pint, in this case, a glass.
Yeah, I didn't carry the beers back here with me because it's Monday.
Yeah, and
it's
what
not
is
really though, is it? It's Wednesday.
It is Wednesday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the subtitle is "Lessons Learned in Making Them Better: Hospitality."
Something very close.
Something very close to that. Yeah. Welcome everyone. My name is John Moynihan. And this is Scott Plath. This is my brother-in-law.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed our first episode. Speaking of first episodes, look, we didn't hit it out of the park, but I think it was a solid single. I mean, it was a solid hit.
I'll accept the single.
Yeah, it was a solid hit. Yeah. I mean, we're going to get better as we move forward and hopefully get some really good engagement from our adoring fans who were hoping to
both of you.
Yeah, both of you. Exactly. But we will, we're going to continue this podcast and talking about hospitality in the world of restaurants and in our lives, just in general. Speaking of our lives, we actually it is in real world time, not podcast time. In real world time, it is the Wednesday after Mother's Day. And in the restaurant industry, Mother's Day is one of the busiest days of the year. You want to talk a little bit about it, what that means here at Cobblestones and Moonstones?
Yeah, sure. I think that we wish that there was a Mother's Day every month of the year. And for those who don't know, our restaurants are for this area, more upper scale, more special occasion, and we have certainly a large enough percentage of regular customers who just come out for burgers and beers and like the fact that we have a quality orientation that we do. But I think for the larger percentage of the demographic, we are a place that folks celebrate. They stretch their pockets a little bit more. We wanted to be a step above, regional chains and just deliver a quality experience. And so that is absolutely evidenced on days like Easter Sunday and Mother's Day and Valentine's Day, where we absolutely sell out. And interesting that this year we surely broke a record between our two restaurants.
Really?
Yeah, it's been 30 years here and 60 in the other, and so we've broken so many records, and I'm not sure how long it would take me or the managers to dig up the data.
Right.
To prove the point, but I'm very confident. The number was huge, bigger than 2019, and as a general rule, each year we have gotten better. Other than setbacks like fire and pandemic, we get better every year, which is part of the theme of this this podcast.
Ooh. I notice you have sorry to interrupt, but I notice you have your clipboard.
I have my clipboard.
And I know you said in our first episode, you don't really do much with it. It's just there.
Yeah.
But I want you to write down fire, because we need to talk about that.
Put on those, and you know what? Yeah. I was going to make mention tonight also, John, that unlike Brian Gumble, I am not going to use the clipboard as a prop. I'm going to use it as a way to keep track of things that get lost in this swirling mess above my shoulders. Mother's Day, you know what? The most rewarding thing about this year's Mother's Day is not the record. The most rewarding thing is that we are still understaffed and since the pandemic, and that's a complexity that's probably not interesting enough to the viewer, but the challenges of post-pandemic life in the restaurant business are persist, and we're still training and we're still hiring and still trying to get back to normalcy in so many different ways. And so when you break records like that, you can't do it without a Herculean effort by the team and the staff and the management, because so much goes into serving hundreds of people at top dollar and meeting or exceeding their expectations. So much. I mean, weeks of planning and notes and meetings and back and forth. And then they just have to bust their ass and do it together as a team, because that is how we excel in this business. So someone actually snapped a picture of me for the half hour that I spent in the dish room just to help bail out the dishwashers. And that's where I started my career. And every once in a while, when I'm not asked to be at the front desk or I'm not asked to be at the expo station in the kitchen on a crazy night, I'll just jump in the dish room because it's comforting and it's in a way home. But it also is good for that whole thing we preach, morale and team, for the staff to see the owner who spends a lot of his time shaking hands and kissing babies, getting wet and greasy and sweaty back there. So yeah, sorry, I'm babbling on, and I know we need to shorten our podcast, but it was such a huge victory. And this business, I said last week in last week's podcast, is so much energy-driven, team-driven, morale-driven, that you don't have a day like that with zero complaints that I'm aware of anyway. And I spoke to every single table at both restaurants. I made it a point this year because it's something I preach to the managers, that there is what absolutely separates us. We have the big secret. People think they come here for food, but really what they come here for is feel good. And there's nothing, I think, that contributes any more than the person leading the shift, making sure they get to the table and making sure that everything was great, and that if anything wasn't great, to get it corrected in whatever it takes to have them walk out the door saying, even if it wasn't a perfect experience, we'll come back because they really care. So yeah, and listen, it's not just no complaints, because I don't buy not just complaints. I try to teach my folks that too. I had people leaving Moonstones a couple of weeks ago, and as they were out the door, the manager said, "Good night, folks." And I said, "How was everything?" And they're like, "Good." And I'm not looking for good. And I could just hear in the tone of her voice that there was something that was not right. And I said, what could have been better? Because I fish, as I say to the managers, I hunt, and I want you to hunt, Are they going to come back? That response wasn't, "We're rushing back." At the end of the day, she says, "The scallops were seared beautifully." I'm like, I love that you're accentuating the positive, but what could have been better is the question at hand. And she said the truffled mashed potatoes, that go beneath the scallops, they really seem to lack flavor and seasoning. I'm like, well, thank you for sharing that. And so anyway, the whole day of Mother's Day, you look for, you ask, you find out, but then you make sure that people are being, truthful with you and just rave reviews. As a matter of fact, I was fighting back emotion a couple times because I was just so proud of the team and know how hard we work to deliver on a day like this, to make people's mothers happy and their families happy, and people telling me that they've been coming here for years and years, or first time here, I can't believe it. And I'm like, well, don't be sorry about that. Just come back.
Just come back.
Yeah.
So to let everyone know, I worked on Mother's Day, and I carved meat for 7.5 hours without a break.
Yeah, which would have been me if John had said no.
So I carved meat, and so I'm, we have it's a very high end.
That's prime ribs of beef.
Prime ribs of beef, and it wasn't just turkey; it was fried turkey that had a brine of maple and sage. It was so good. People actually loved that. Once I got, I told Chef after, I was like, you buried the lead. If you'd told me that, I would have been selling it more. And, but yeah, it was really good.
And you know what, to your point, you absolutely should have known all the ingredients in what you were serving, and your gravy should have absolutely been ready the first time that you were carving the meats. But just so happens that Mother's Day this year fell on graduation weekend.
Yeah.
And I made a post on social media on, I think, Thursday, saying, essentially, please stop calling. Between Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we cannot accept any more reservations. We are to capacity, and we got our asses kicked for 3 straight days. And so that's the details that we talk about, that, you just have to get the food out on time, and you have to make sure that the staff is all in place, and you have the proper tools, and 5 minutes of pre-meal training that we're reminding them how to ring in things, and the smaller details fall through the cracks, unfortunately. But these guys, the chef probably left midnight on Saturday and was back at 7 a.m. And he lives an hour away.
Right. So I was at the tail end of the buffet, right? Because that's where you put the carving station. You put it at the tail end of the buffet. Because you want everybody to try all the different dishes, right? There's the whole line of breakfast, and then there's the salads, and then there's the sort of lunch kind of meals.
You've been with the eggs, right?
Yeah. And
eggs, potatoes, bacon, sausage, moving its way to the salads, and then we transition to the unch part of brunch. Right?
Yeah. And it was great. I had a lot of fun, and it really is fun to kind of sit there and interact. It wasn't physically demanding, but being on your feet for that long, 7.5 hours, and the social aspect. A lot of people don't realize that takes energy, right? You want to go out and you want to have a good time, and you want people to serve you with a smile. Well, let me ask you a question. Do you really feel like smiling every single day?
Me?
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
No.
For years, and John's family is very social. They took the lead from mom and dad, who go to every event. And so my wife carries the tradition, and spending years in this business are just way too many times. I'm like, I don't want to go to a cocktail party. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go to a social event. I do that all day long. I'm like, when I'm done working, I want to sit in a cool, dark room and just, stare at the TV, or close my eyes and and enjoy the peace and quiet. It's hard. It's hard to be on demand
you are a server,
all the time.
You don't have a choice because it's your job, and so you have to come here and you have to put on that. And sometimes it's easy, and it actually was easy on Mother's Day. It was a lot of fun. But I will tell you, when I ended, I am actually not like my dad. Like, my dad is super social. I am, I kind of, over years of introspection, kind of figured out my personality type is I am an extroverted introvert. Like, I like being in front of people. It's what I do for work. I get up and I get in front of crowds and I talk and I teach. But man, I have a tank. And when that tank is empty, just like you said, I need to go in a dark room and not say words. And we finished, and then our family came, and we were in this room, and we had a Mother's Day dinner just with our family. And I probably said 15 words the whole time because I was empty. My social battery was empty. I was like, okay, I'm done.
I get it.
Yeah.
I recharged the battery with a couple of drinks at the bar and a little bourbon at the table.
That always
Speaking
helps.
of bourbon, by the way, we decided last week, intuitively, I put a bottle of scotch and a bottle of bourbon on the table in a nod to our fathers. My father is a scotch drinker, about the only thing he drinks when he drinks, which isn't very often. And John's dad, my father-in-law, is a bourbon guy. And I fall in between. I lean a little bit more towards the bourbon, particularly after a bourbon tour that a bunch of us took in Kentucky together, which was a memorable, stupid weekend. But so in a nod to our fathers, and we're gonna do lots of nods on this during this process, because I often think as I continue to explore how this book goes from chapter 1 to chapter whatever, how is that theme created? What's the thread that binds? And I have thought at times that each chapter should just be named after somebody that has taught me a valuable lesson, because I have been enriched by so many great minds and beautiful people and family members that they just drop a ball of wisdom in your lap, and you remember it forever. You carry it forever. And I could talk for days about those lessons. I actually have a document in the computer, that is filled with quotes that, are gleaned from others, but that have inspired my management style and my career, that I share with others in teaching and doing shit like this.
Speaking about those people, we are in the music room, and this is where we had our family dinner on Mother's Day. You want to tell us a little bit about the music room?
I would love to.
Yeah.
We are in Cobblestones, downtown Lowell. We shot last week at the Bar, which I think both of us would agree is our favorite place in the restaurant. It's just a great bar, and the bread and butter of Cobblestones through 30 years of being here. But the music room 30 years ago was named the French Room because of all the beautiful French doors. And if we could pan around the restaurant, you would see the beauty and elegance and coolness of this dining side of our building, where the tavern on the other side is very, burger beer like.
Paint a picture. We're primarily audio, so paint a picture.
Yeah, how am I doing? Am I not doing
You're
well?
doing great.
Oh, okay, all right.
There's 3 sets of beautiful French doors in this room, and there's.
Yeah, so the French Room. So this business was launched when I moved here 38 years ago and started working for others. Something like 38 years ago. Well, that would have been 1986.
Yeah.
After I married your sister and moved up here and started working for others. And my chef in New York at the time that I decided to move here and get married and start a life in Lowell, he and I used to drink Beck's beers at the Cobblestone Tavern after our work for a City Corp owned resort, and talk about starting a business together. His culinary skill, my business acumen and background. And a couple years later, I got a call one day, and Ed Z was moving here and wanted to start a business. So we started a catering business. 5 years later, we were tired of washing our own dishes and filling our cars with equipment, and started looking for a deli or something that would help facilitate growth. And here along comes your father, who worked for City Hall at the time, and says, I know a building that's, to be had in downtown. It's a restaurant. And we were looking for a deli storefront, with a dish machine and maybe some glass cases to sell some of the byproduct. And here we are in this 12,000 square foot historic building. And we never looked back. It was ready to go, other than some beautiful paint and wallpaper. And Ed Z was our executive chef from day one. And I think we should talk way more about him in the future, but because we wouldn't be here if it weren't for him and his giving me the push, like you're giving me the push in the book, to move forward and to find a space. And we worked round the clock for the 7 years that he was here. He finally begged out. He didn't see that the success that I insisted on seeing, and he was getting burnt out. And he loved music, and he ended up having a girlfriend and started working for a school for developmentally disabled children, where he cooked breakfast and I believe played the piano.
Yeah.
And Ed sadly passed away a number of years later. He was not well, and I think that certainly you could say some of his illness was influenced by the life that he led in the restaurant business. So in his honor, we renamed this private dining room the Z's Music Room. And then Bard borrowed a bunch of classic jazz albums and blues albums from my father's huge collection that are hanging around the room, with a piano tucked in the back that we inherited from my grandmother when she passed on. So Ed Z's Music Room, in testimony to one of the many, many people who are essential in creating the success that is Cobblestones.
Yeah, to Ed.
To Ed Z.
To Ed
Cheers.
Z. Cheers. I want to tell a story because you mentioned the start, right? And it's a much longer story about how you get started here, but just to give a little background for those of you who don't know Lowell, I grew up in Lowell. I went to high school right next door to this building, and my dad is from Lowell, and my dad's a bricklayer, mason, salt of the earth, blue collar, and this building actually has a very, very storied history going back to 1859 or 57. I get confused.
1859 is when it was completed. It took a few years to build. Yeah.
But towards the end, before Cobblestones opened in 1994, there was a series of restaurants, each of which failed. Right? There was a series of restaurants, and I'll never forget this because at the time I was probably, how old was I? I was in the early 20s, and when you came in and you started, and we were getting closer and closer to opening, I just remember all of the Lowell people, because Lowell has a bit of a checkered history, and there was a period of time where Lowell was fairly depressed. There was
in 1994 when we opened his restaurant, it was at the bottom of the economic cycle.
Yeah, it was pretty depressed, and there was a lot of talk about Lowell and Lawrence, and it's not safe, and you don't want to be there, and blah blah blah. And here comes Scott, and he gets into this building, this fancy, beautiful building, and he starts opening. And I'll never forget where he's bringing out the first menu, and on the menu there was draft beer. And it was, I think, at the time, like $3, right? It was $3. And everybody in my family that's from Lowell says, what are you talking about? You cannot charge $3 for a draft beer. That's insane. You can just go right around the corner to the Worthen and get it for 80 cents or something like that.
The story, the facts, if I recall correctly, were the current beer price for a Budweiser was $1.99, and we charged $2.49.
Yeah.
I mean, close enough to $3. And maybe a larger draft beer was $2.99. But yeah. And the point being that we wanted to, we had an inherent sense, because I had never owned a business before, that it would only take 50 cents to keep the riffraff out.
That's right.
And when I say riffraff, I mean people who overdrink and fight and steal things off the walls. Not that we've never lost anything off the wall. We've lost a few things, but
which was most places in Lowell.
Yeah. It was a lot of bar rooms, diners and bar rooms in this town when I opened Cobblestones.
And I'll never forget something you said, and I love this quote to this day, because again, there was an uproar, because in the beginning, when you first opened, you did not carry Budweiser.
That's right.
You did not carry Budweiser, and everybody's like, "You have to have Budweiser. It's the most popular beer." And I'll never forget what you said. You said, "Listen, not everyone who drinks Budweiser is an asshole, but every asshole drinks Budweiser." And so we're not going to carry. By the way, is Budweiser here now, or is it no?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's coming. It's gone. It's coming. It's gone.
At the beginning, you had a strategy. You're like, no, Lowell's never had a restaurant like this before. Yeah. It's never had this high-end feel, and that's what we're going to go for. And everyone said it would never work. Yeah. It would never work. Lowell's a blue-collar town, but man, did it work. People loved it.
Yeah, I think, I've made some smart moves. I've made some really bad ones too. But you know what? I think both times, both restaurants that we opened, and actually all three, but I won't talk about the third one today, that we closed since, because it opened in the first month of a pandemic, scheduled to open in the first month of a pandemic. I think I overshot the demographic in both locations. But I think in this one, look, you can't argue with 16 years and 30 years. Would I be 3.5 million instead of 2.5 million if I had just been a Mexican restaurant, or a tavern? Maybe, but who knows how much more trouble there would have been? Or I don't know. I'm not much for looking back. Just learning from mistakes. But the idea, we were smart enough here. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. We were really stupid when we launched this restaurant because we had a 3-page menu.
Oh.
Everything from steak tips and mashed potatoes to a turkey cashew pate inlaid with lingonberry and cashew, fancy higher end French food that Eddie was classically trained for. And we thought we would hit both ends of the spectrum. I mean, we opened, and 3 weeks later, we pulled an all-nighter rewriting the menu to something that was manageable to the current staff that we had, because they were all brand new. They weren't chefs. They weren't cooks. We didn't have a training budget to get them all up to speed. And Lowell was so hungry for a better restaurant that we killed it from day one, but we just couldn't keep up. We had 45-minute lunch tickets, and that is not the way to bring people back through the door.
Right.
But we were smart enough to have those steak tips and have that burger and real beer food to balance this this lovely dining room and what I say, the theater crowd with the tavern and the hockey crowd, because we're surrounded on one side by theater and Broadway shows, and on the other side by an arena that has hockey and now professional football, and the first women's professional hockey team, which are now in the playoffs as of a victory last night, which spanked us. We were packed on a Tuesday night.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Which, by the way, there was no arena when you opened.
No. A year later, they followed us.
Yeah, and so since 1994, which, as Scott mentioned, that was kind of a low point. Lowell went through a bit of a renaissance, and really there was a lot of the arena came in. We had more arts kind of open up, and all
ballpark.
The ballpark.
Red Sox single A affiliate came to town and built a ballpark here.
Yeah,
the university has tripled in size in the 30 years that we've been here.
And you were there at the start.
Yeah.
In fact, you were a catalyst.
I like to say that we began it, and that's not arrogance, and I don't mean that everybody came here because I came here, but we were one of the very first. I mean, listen, we got in dirt cheap. The owner of the building had had enough.
Yeah.
The economic downturn of 1994 with your biggest retailer in the city of Lowell had just moved out of town, leaving a giant vacant building on Main Street. And it's funny because we opened Moonstones, funny, not ha-ha funny, Joe Pesci somewhere in the room, but we opened Moonstones in 2008, right at the dot-com crash.
Yep.
Right? And the whole economy went into a whirlwind, like literally 2 or 3 months after we opened the door. And then many years later, 15 years later, we decided to launch a beta site for growth. We were killing it at both of these restaurants. So we came up with a concept of the future, which to this day I will argue was brilliant. But it was slated to open in March 2020. And the name of it was Stone Social. A social concept where the month we start to open, they start telling people to stay away from each other, wear masks, stay inside, no group gatherings. And when we
social
were
distancing.
Social distancing, like the whole thing. I'm like, holy shit. And I had an uncle who laughed and said, you know what? They say you can't time the market. He said, I will absolutely start investing the next time you plan on opening a restaurant. It's because you indicate an economic downturn. Every time we've opened a restaurant has been at the bottom. It's ridiculous.
Hey, you wanted to, speaking about, first of all, apologies. If probably about 25 minutes ago, I noticed that Scott's microphone was not turned on, so I turned it on for him. So if at the very beginning, I've been watching, so I don't know, like at one point I'll take some pictures of the setup here, but I can actually see the audio on a little tiny screen on the camera right here. So it looked like it was capturing Scott, probably off of my microphone. But if in the beginning he sounds a little lower, that's my bad. So that's my bad. I'll try and fix it. But post.
And now I know, turn on the microphone.
It's got to glow. It's got to glow.
Now I see the glowy disc.
Gotta glow blue.
Yeah.
By the way, it's not your fault. It is. I love these microphones. They don't advertise, but they're called Saramonic. But there is a design flaw because like you take them and you clip them, and where you would normally grab to clip where you turn it off.
The off
turn it
button.
on and off.
Yeah,
so it's definitely an engineering issue and not you.
I don't think it could be more intuitive where you just when you plug in the jack, it comes on automatically.
There's a new version. These are the older versions. There's a new version where they fixed it.
Yeah. Smart.
But speaking of things that happened in the first episode, you wanted to talk a little bit about something that you said last episode.
I only wanted to make a correction because it was sloppy speak, and I engage in sloppy speak because, and before I get to the point, and you'll bring me back to your sister, I laugh at your dad, who is the opposite. And I've told this story probably 25 times about the night your father was telling me a story, and he left the house and got in the truck to go meet a fella, and he got in the truck at 6:30 a.m. and actually it was 6:40 a.m. It was 6:40 a.m. and I got in the truck and it was 6:35, and I'm like, Jim, who cares when you got in the truck? I'm like, it absolutely doesn't. Is it germane to the story in any way? He's like, no, it's not. So he's like a really exact talker, and I'm like, who cares what the number is? Like, unless the number really matters, it's for the sake of the story and moving on. But sometimes it matters, and I mentioned last week in some context that I don't even recall, but in rewatching how fidgety I am and how much I say I heard myself saying that while I was, busting ass getting this restaurant launched, my life partner, wife, best friend, Kathy, was the primary caregiver to our children. Well, that is short of
incorrect.
That is incorrect. That's the word I'm looking for. That is incorrect. She was the primary household manager. She was a primary caregiver in setting up caregiving, but she also had a full-time sales job in high tech, and technology, and went on to become, a very successful businesswoman. I, used to think that nobody could outwork me. Well, I married somebody who can outwork me, and she still doesn't stop. And I'm like, oh my God, put it away, So I just wanted to set the record straight on that, for fear of being disrespectful. Because through the years, I've grown actually even more appreciative. I've loved Kathy from day one, absolutely, but certainly have come to appreciate and respect her so much more through the years. She's quite amazing.
Yes, she is.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to
no worries.
expand on that oversight.
So we talked about Mother's Day, and thank you, by the way. So Scott made a special menu just for my wife because he knows how much my wife loves lobster rolls. And, he was texting me the day before saying, oh, are you guys going to be there? Is Jen going to be there? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And he's like, all right, I'm going to try and grab her a lobster roll from Moonstones. They were having them at Moonstones, but not here. And I said, oh man, she would love that. And it just so happened we were at lunch at a restaurant right around the corner from here, the Athenian Corner. And she was talking about lobster rolls because she had had one the weekend before at a bridal shower. And he texted me that. I was like, oh my God, she's talking about lobster rolls right now.
Yeah.
And so you actually printed out a special menu just for her, and there was an additional item that said Jen's lobster rolls.
Yeah.
Lobster roll by Jen.
Yeah.
So we
well, you know what? That's there's so many so many smaller stories to that, but obviously Jen loves lobster rolls, and making the wives and the mothers happy on Mother's Day is, what we do, and those little things go so far. But also because of these times, post-pandemic times, and the family who was with us very much in the beginning, but we've grown these restaurants into multi-million-dollar operations without needing the family's sweat and hands-on. But lately, you guys have been saving us, and staffing us enough so that we could do hundreds of holiday meals, and that also takes us out of our, what would be a normal routine, and either go to a different restaurant, not mine, on Mother's Day, or have it at one of the houses, the family's houses, and it would be much more homey, with sitting on the couch and watching a game afterwards. Now we have the meals at the restaurants because that's where half the family is. So I want to make sure that Jen knows how much I appreciate her sacrifice on behalf of our restaurants, even though we don't have her slicing any of the meats.
Yeah, not slicing the meats, but no, thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah, she appreciates
it. It kind of reminds me of a story years ago when very, very early on at Moonstones, when two people were visiting town on business, and they asked if we had lobster, and we serve lobster meat on a couple of dishes, like our eggs Benedict with lobster on Sunday mornings, but we didn't have whole lobsters. But these guys were in New England and they wanted lobsters for dinner. And the manager said to the server, "No, we don't have lobsters." I'm like, wait, hold on. And we're like, no, the chef said there's no whole lobsters. They're all broken down. I'm like, you know what? Go start a pot of water boiling. I said, tell them we can do them lobsters, but it's going to be 20, 25 minutes before they're ready. And are they okay with that? And the manager's looking at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm going to drive up to the supermarket. They've got a lobster tank. I'm going to grab 2 lobsters, bring them back. The water will be boiling. We'll drop them down. They'll have no idea that we bought 2 lobsters in the back door just for them. Yeah. So, you can't do things like that all the time, but when you can, you absolutely should. You absolutely should. Especially in these days of social media and the stories that people like to tell.
Yeah. But, and it's funny. So we're talking about hospitality, right? That's the industry that you're in and have been in your entire career. And there is a level of, man, you got to roll with the punches. You got to adapt. I don't know the origin of this story, if it came from here or it came from elsewhere, but somebody coming in and wanting to get a grilled cheese for their kid, and the server saying, well, it's not on the menu, so no. And then the manager saying, well, we don't have that on the menu, no. And it's like, do you have bread? Yes. Do you have cheese?
You're remembering a Clint Eastwood movie.
Or something.
Yeah, that's a Clint.
But still, it applies. It's like.
Yeah, right. Didn't he want toast?
Well, that's the Blues Brothers, isn't that? I want dry white toast.
Can you take the cheese off?
Yeah.
I want that, but without the cheese. Something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to adapt. And you know what? Like I've always said, it's fairly simple. The answer is always yes. It's and I learned this from a businessman many years ago. It's about the terms. It's not the price. It's the terms.
Okay.
And so you always say yes, but then there's an asterisk. There's always an asterisk on the yes. And if you say to somebody, the example I always use when somebody said something absolutely ridiculous like, once upon a time salad came with the meal. Those days are over, right? That's how old we are. When bread and salad all came, with your protein, vegetable, and potato on the same plate. We say, if somebody said, may I substitute for my salad? And we're like, yeah, of course you can. Like, would you like French fries or baked potato? And we're like, no, I would like a filet mignon. And like the answer to the question is yes, you may substitute the salad with a filet mignon for $30.
Right.
You said yes.
Yeah.
You said yes. And so like the lobster story is, yeah, we can get you lobster. It's going to take 20 to 30 minutes. But sometimes you tell me, we had something, this was an event night the other night, and somebody asked for something that wasn't being offered on the menu. We had a sold out crowd. And on those nights, we stay away from substituting, putting things on the menu, special orders. It's just, you got to stick to the menu or everyone else suffers. everyone's trying to make the puck drop or the theater, the curtain. And so you have to sacrifice one for the whole. But someone asked for something special the other night, and the chef, I was so proud of him. I was in the kitchen working the expo for a minute. He kicked me out ultimately, but and he said, yes, we can do that, but it's going to be half an hour before I can start it. Because he's gonna have to leave the line and go get ingredients.
Right.
So again, you say yes,
Right.
but I can't do it right now. Don't have the
I like that.
ingredients.
You add that. Yeah, it's yes, but with terms.
Yeah, and in this case, these people were not going to the event, and they said, we accept your terms. So they probably had an extra cocktail.
Yep.
And then chef got to it.
Yeah, and they were happy.
Yeah, I think
That's
that's
the
the
goal.
way it should work. Doesn't always work that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and the other thing, like when you say you can always say yes with terms, that is different, and this is going to be a whole podcast, I think. That is different than the customer's always right. That's different.
Yeah, that's a whole nother. Yeah, that's a whole.
Because one of the things that I learned from you is
trail.
that saying, the customer is always right, is horseshit.
Yeah.
It's not true. It is not true.
Yeah.
And as somebody in hospitality, and knowing how hard it is, it's your job and your manager's job to protect your staff.
Yeah, that's right.
From
That's
that.
right. And again, back to what I said a moment ago, sometimes you have to sacrifice one on behalf of the whole. And we teach the customers always right to our staff, because they can't be charged with the responsibility to
Right.
make those judgment calls.
Right.
It's just, that would be bad business on so many levels. But really, at the end of the day, we can't have a customer sacrificing other customers' experience or our staff's feeling of being in a safe place and being respected. And I'll never forget Steve Simone, manager here, waiter turned bartender turned manager, who was with us for at least 10 years, and I'll never forget a time that the 6 customers ordered Cosmopolitans and complained there was no alcohol in the drinks. And I'm like, it's nothing but alcohol. And I'm like, we're not making 6 new Cosmopolitans. I watched them make, and they got up and they left, and this was Steve managing the situation. I'm like, really, you don't think we should have made it again? He's like, every time they're here, they're difficult. He said, this is what they do. He goes, and every once in a while, you have to fire a guest.
Yeah.
Right? And that's on my list. That's on my
Yep.
list. Every once in a while, you have to fire a guest. Yeah, like the less you do it, the better it is for business. But it reminds me of a story of a Boston chef whose server came into the kitchen crying because she was absolutely being verbally abused by a table in the dining room. And the chef, I'm paraphrasing the story, it's been years, took the apron off, went to this table that had been complaining, and said, let me ask you a question. And I read this probably in the Boston Globe. And it said, if you were in a movie right now and you hated everything about the movie, you'd walk out. So let me ask you, why are you still here? I'm like, go someplace else.
Yeah.
We obviously can't make you happy. We've had a couple of instances of that through the years here too.
Oh yeah.
For sure. I once asked a lady to leave. Her husband looked like he was scared to death of what was going to ensue, but I said, you're not going to be happy here tonight. It was on one of those event nights.
Yep.
She was mad that I greeted her wearing a dirty shirt because I was coming from the kitchen. And I'm like, you're not going to be happy here. Go someplace else.
Yeah.
And then as soon as she walked out the door, I turned to the 3 staff members who were standing there with their mouths open. I can't believe he just did that. And I said, make no mistake, I'm the only person who can do that.
Right. Yeah. All right. I think we should start wrapping this one up, because some of the feedback we got on the first one, and we've kind of come to a decision. It went a little long.
Yeah.
Our first one went a little long.
I thought so too. I watched it 2 or 3 times again, just to give some.
Yeah.
This
So we're
the
gonna-
first time.
yeah.
The first time
We're gonna shorten it, and believe me, there
It's too
will be times, because we'll get into conversation, and that's just how we are, where it will be long, and
But they have to be interesting conversations.
they do have to be interesting. Yeah. I do like.
Otherwise, we
yeah.
can just sit around at the bar and tell each other stories.
Yeah, but that's interesting. I find that interesting.
What, telling each other stories?
Yes.
Me too.
Well, I mean,
Mostly.
going back to the beginning of this, when you're talking about people, farting because of they're eating the wrong food.
Oh, gluten-free, the whole gluten-free thing, don't let me get started on that.
Yeah, but it does come out like you were talking about the nutritionist and how Kathy is, sensitive to almonds and she's been drinking almond milk, but it's like we're all, when I say I'm using the royal we, that we as a people are really trying to be more nutritious conscious, and there's so much information out there and so much of it is just bullshit. And we're all trying to be healthier. And if you are in our generation, we're all getting older, and we're all on our journey. I've actually been on a journey for a while, and I've been pretty successful. I've been dropping some pounds.
Wonderful.
And it's
wonderful, John. Very good.
And it's all, it is food, but it's also, I've been like exercising like a maniac.
It's getting boring, by the way.
And well, I'm getting to the good stuff. You just figure out.
Okay.
So basically, but what's happened is I feel great, but when I wake up in the morning, all I am in is pain. And like I get up and I start walking and I like have to think for a minute, am I injured or is this just how I walk now?
Right. Because of all those new muscles.
Yeah.
Well, this reminds me of a previous time that you were on a fitness kick, and then, I don't know, you were lifting more weights than a 50-something man should try to lift.
Yeah.
And what did you do? You
broke my leg.
You broke your leg.
Broke my leg. I broke the bone that goes into my hip, that little ball with the little neck, it just twisted it. Yeah, that sucked. Yeah, I was pretending I was 23 and I was in my 50s. So, yeah,
The
not
good
good.
old days.
Yeah, well, and that sets you back. Yeah, getting hurt now is no joke.
Yeah, that's right. I hear you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just sit in the chair the wrong way and my hip is raging for an hour and a half.
Well, you reach for a mug and it's on a shelf that's a little higher than normal, and you throw your shoulder out. You're like, "Ugh."
I pulled a muscle last week doing something absolutely mundane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need to. Oh, you know what? I golfed a couple weeks ago in Florida, and like I have spent my whole life golfing without stretching.
Yep.
I mean, my whole life.
Yep.
And but this was like really one of the first times. I'm gonna be 61 next week, and I absolutely, I took a couple warm-up swings on the tee box, and then I smashed a drive straight into the woods, and at the same time, pulled a muscle in the middle of my back.
Yeah.
I could just feel the whole thing tighten up. I'm like, I walked off. I actually was with Kathy, and I walked off the tee box. I said to her, I don't think I can golf anymore.
Oh my God! Oh, you left.
No, I played the rest of the day.
Okay.
I worked it out. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah.
But yeah, lessons learned as you get older and stay stupid. You're supposed to get smarter.
Yeah.
Smarter, not harder.
So, great stuff, man.
Here's on you.
Thank you for joining us again. Listen, this is episode number 2, and just a little peek behind the curtain. We're going to try and get 3 or 4 episodes under our belt before we launch. So we have not, as of today, we haven't launched yet, but I have been working in the background. I've actually set up our podcast page on YouTube, so that'll be available. We'll be available on all the regular audio podcast, Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those other things. You'll be able to find us, and we will be starting up a Patreon. And obviously, once we do go live, we're going to need your help to get the word out. And
I want to mention, John, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You're really good at this, by the way. That's one of the things in watching the podcast last week. I noticed you're very good at this. Me, I'm like, wow, you got a lot of things to fix. But you don't have to tell them that we haven't launched yet. By the time they're hearing this, we'll have launched.
Yeah. Oh no, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah, I get it. But I'm fairly analytical and scientific, so I like a little peek behind the curtains. I like to know what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So who's peeking behind the curtains?
So the audience. So I'm giving them a little. They'll know that we've already passed this, but that's okay.
Okay, you say so.
Those will be in the past.
All right.
Trust me, it's all good. All right, thanks everybody, and we'll see you in a week or so, and we'll have our episode 3. We don't know what we're going to talk about yet, but it'll be interesting.
We won't have trouble finding something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 5 things.
Yep.
Cheers.
Cheers.